They had the factories, they had the engineers, they had budgets that could fund entire nations. For decades, the legacy automakers, Ford, Chevrolet, Toyota, Honda, Hyundai, owned this market without a single serious challenge. They set the prices. They decided what a family SUV should look like, should feel like, should cost. And when buyers complained, when the math stopped making sense, when people started asking why a crossover with plastic trim and a bargain bin powertrain was pushing $40,000, $50,000, they raised the price again. They called it market adjustment. They called it operational cost. They called it inevitable. And for years, we believed them. We financed their mediocrity. We accepted hard plastic door panels, 3-cylinder engines running beyond any rational limit, and infotainment screens that froze like a 2009 tablet. We paid premium prices for entry-level engineering and convinced ourselves there was no other way. They had the dealer networks, they had the lobbyists, they had the generational brand loyalty, the kind built on nostalgia and habit rather than on the product itself. They had everything they needed to hold the game forever. And yet, they failed. While the legacy brands were busy defending yesterday, raising prices, trimming features, betting that loyalty would outlast logic, something different was happening on the other side of the world. Quietly, methodically, no press releases, no fanfare. GWM didn't come to compete, it came to collapse the market. It didn't arrive with a PowerPoint presentation. It acquired a Mercedes-Benz factory, a cash transaction, no lease, no joint venture, no compromise. It brought the Haval H4, a full hybrid that went on to outsell the Toyota RAV4 hybrid and Jeep Compass in multiple markets. It proved it could build. It proved the market would respond. And only then, only after that, did it point its engineers toward the segment where real volume lives. The segment where families actually buy, where money is counted carefully and the decision genuinely matters. And that's where things started to get uncomfortable for everyone else. On paper, the Haval H4 sounds familiar. Mid-size SUV, hybrid powertrain, modern design. You've heard that before. Every brand announces a hybrid now. Every press release uses the same language: efficient, advanced, connected. You scroll past it. You've been disappointed enough times to know that advanced usually means an extra USB port and a glossy finish that sounds hollow when you knock on it. So when you first hear about the H4, you nod and move on. That's exactly where the trap is set. Let's start with what this car is actually built on, because this isn't a story about a single model. The Haval H4 rides on the same modular platform as the Haval H6, the hybrid that already cracked open multiple markets. That platform is built with ultra-high-strength steel. This isn't a combustion chassis with an electric motor bolted on as an afterthought. This car was born hybrid. The hybrid system isn't a feature, it's the foundation. The powertrain combines a 1.5-liter Atkinson-Miller cycle engine, tuned for thermodynamic efficiency, not raw power, with a high-performance electric motor. Together, the system delivers 190 combined horsepower and nearly 300 pound-feet of torque. For a vehicle this size, that isn't modest, that's dominant. But the number that matters most isn't horsepower, it's what happens when you stop chasing output and start chasing waste. In city driving, the stop-and-go reality of every American commute, the H4 delivers the equivalent of around 50 miles per gallon. Not in a lab cycle with a tailwind and an optimistic engineer running the sim. In real traffic, in the city, where every traditional competitor averages 23, maybe 25 mpg when the driver is careful and conditions cooperate. And that's just the beginning. To understand what that efficiency actually means, you need a calculator and a calendar, not a brochure. Consider a driver putting 1,500 miles on the car per month. A realistic number for someone with a long commute, a sales route, or a side hustle that depends on the vehicle. In a Chevrolet Equinox 1.5T at 28 mpg combined, with gas at $3.50 a gallon, that driver is spending roughly $190 a month at the pump. Over 5 years, that's more than $11,000. In the Haval H4, at the equivalent of 48 mpg, conservative, not optimistic, That same driver spends roughly $109 a month. Over 5 years, $6,500. The difference is more than $4,500. That's not rounding error. That's a down payment on something else. That's money that today evaporates at the pump every time a traditional SUV owner fills up, and now, for the first time at this price point, can stay in the buyer's pocket. This is where the comparison stops being comfortable. Now let's talk about the powertrain in a way that actually makes sense to anyone who's ever been surprised by a repair bill. No oil-bathed timing belt, no heat exchanger cross-contaminating transmission fluid, no CVT belt slipping under load on a hot afternoon. The H4 uses a DHT, a dedicated hybrid transmission, and unit engineered specifically to blend combustion and electric propulsion with mechanical precision. It isn't an adaptation, it isn't a workaround, it's engineering built from scratch for one purpose: to be robust, to be efficient, and to last. The combustion engine in this system never takes the brutal punishment of urban stop and go alone. In city conditions, the electric motor handles propulsion. The gasoline engine operates in its ideal range, generating energy, managing highway loads, without being hammered through the thermal cycles that destroy small turbos over time. What this means for the owner is simple: the car works less hard. A system that works less hard lasts longer. A car that lasts longer stops being a financial liability and starts being a rational decision. But what comes next changes the conversation entirely. Step inside and the story shifts. The legacy brands spent the last decade delivering a masterclass in subtraction. They pulled the fabric off door panels. They eliminated the glove box light. They stopped insulating the hood. They painted over acoustic material and called it weight reduction. You paid $40,000, $50,000 and got the interior philosophy of an entry-level car repackaged in a slightly taller body. The Haval H4 doesn't subtract, it confronts. Soft-touch surfaces with injected foam, the kind that absorbs contact silently and doesn't creak, doesn't resonate. Seats in perforated synthetic leather with heating and ventilation depending on trim. A 12.3-inch high-definition display running a processor that actually responds. Wireless CarPlay and Android Auto that hold their connection. A rotary gear selector in an elevated center console. And a panoramic sunroof that extends to rear passengers, standard on mid and top trims. The competition charges extra for the panoramic roof and still restricts it to the version that costs $10,000 more. GWM includes it in the package. That's not a comparison, that's a generation gap. The exterior carries that intention in physical form. Length, 176 inches. The Chevrolet Equinox, 183, but the H4 undercuts it by a full price tier while matching it in presence. Full LED projection headlights that cut low and wide, built to look aggressive from a distance. Tail lights with a graphic identity that's contemporary without being derivative. This isn't a borrowed face from a 5-year-old European model. It's original design, validated in global markets, sold in Australia, sold in South Africa, in markets that demand proof of quality before acceptance. Put that in the North American reality. This car won't run on a test track. It'll run on the I-95, on cracked asphalt in the Midwest, in Phoenix heat at 110 degrees. And it's exactly for real use conditions, not ideal lab environments, that the hybrid platform was calibrated to perform. Combustion reserved for where it makes sense. Electric taking over where combustion fails. Efficiency where American drivers need it most, in traffic, in the city, every single day. And the next level is where things truly get out of hand. Because what the arrival of this car represents goes beyond one more model on a lot. This is the first wave. When a product with this value ratio enters the market, it doesn't quietly occupy a niche. It forces a reevaluation of everything around it. The resale values of direct competitors begin to soften. The depreciation curve on an Equinox or a CR-V purchased today is going to tilt downward faster than the buyer expects. Not because those are bad cars, but because the market's reference point has moved. A combustion SUV bought today at full price is not a financial neutral decision. It's a bet that efficiency doesn't matter, that fuel costs will stay stable, and that 5 years from now, a gasoline crossover with decade-old technology will hold its value against a generation of hybrids priced at entry level. That bet has already lost. And that changes the entire game. Remember how this story started? The brands that had everything, the factories, the relationships, the cultural weight of generations, and still failed to deliver a fair product at a fair price. They didn't fail for lack of resources. They failed because they stopped respecting the person signing the financing contract. They assumed loyalty was permanent. They assumed there was no alternative. The Haval H4 is the alternative. Not a compromise, not a gamble, a direct answer. Developed globally, built with intent, priced to make every legacy competitor justify its existence from zero. So here's where we leave you, not with a recommendation, but with a question only you can answer. You're not choosing between a Chinese brand and an American one. You're not choosing between the familiar and the unknown. You're choosing between a vehicle that will cost you more every single month that sits in your driveway, and one that puts money back in your pocket every time you don't stop for gas. You're choosing a product built to maximize the manufacturer's margin and one built to earn the buyer's trust through performance. You're not choosing a car. You're choosing which era you belong to. The problem isn't that this car arrived. The problem is you're still looking at what came before it.